In March 2024, I did some pretty hard pruning on a load of my Chinese elm, particularly some of my cheaper import Chinese elms. And guess what? They don't all look like that. But I didn't just prune these. I also dug up one of my original cuttings, which was about 4 foot tall from a nursery bed. When I pulled it out, there was an incredible problem with the roots. It had none, but I planted it nonetheless into a pond basket. Well, you're going to get to find out just how it progressed over the last 9 months and whether or not I still have a living Chinese elm from that. And along the way, I'm also going to talk to you about some of the common problems I have with growing Chinese elm, particularly how you can identify root issues. I'm going to talk to you about cuttings, of course, and the best thing about this,
it gets better. A lot better.
Chinese elm can come indoors. You can do this stuff all year round, and I have. And finally, if you want to find out the easiest, freest, cheapest way of getting successfully struck Chinese elm cuttings, you need to watch for that as well. There's tons in this, and if you love Chinese elm, then this is definitely the episode for you. So keep watching. Hi, it's Xavier. Welcome to a bonsai retreat, and we went wild on the Chinese elm a good couple of months back. And by the way, this 4 foot cutting is, well, say it was a cutting about 2 inches long, well, 4 or 5 years ago. There's a lot down there. We're going to pull it out and have a look. You've been waiting to know what I think the real problem, what is going to be the biggest challenge for this Chinese elm. Apart from the fact that the basket is an absolute write-off, that's all we've got. Practically no roots. I've got a few straggly roots here and nothing much more. And then obviously with this plain of trees, plain of trunks. Now, it's really difficult to know what to do with this, but what I am going to do is test. This is the ideal candidate for what happens if you basically remove everything that's a root and just see how much roots it can produce with nothing. I assured you it would come back stronger, and there it is. There's loads of plush growth at the top and around the sides, and certainly already enough that I can be seeing a future for this tree. Now, right now, I mean, I've got some growth in crotches and stuff like that I can remove right now, and I've got a lot of growth coming, and some of it is still quite tender. It's still very, very new, and yes, I could probably go around now and remove points where there's 2 or 3 coming from the same point, like here in this junction here, but it's very, very soft. So I'm going to leave this for a few more weeks and come back to you. And I think at the time we also had this stick. Again, you look, it responds well to the fact that you rip everything off by saying, hey, I need new branches. Now this has got loads of growth. What I'll do is I'll let it go, say for another 2 or 3 weeks, start getting a better idea for which ones the tree has decided to pick as the better growth. At this stage there's so much everywhere that I could possibly do more harm than good if I started trying to do some rubbing off and selection. We'll come back on this one, but hey, let's show you a couple of others because they've responded differently, bearing in mind they were pruned at the same time. Now this is the one that has an incredible, interesting root base, all sorts of gangly stuff all over it, but I definitely took this back very, very hard. And you know, for the first 4 or 5 weeks, and if you look back at some earlier tour videos, you'll see it was nothing but a bit of wood, and then suddenly it started pushing out growth. Now I can definitely remove stuff from crotches, but I've got loads and loads of growth absolutely everywhere, and this is where definitely to start clearing up where you know you're not going to want anything, so you can see the trunk again. That's just wasted energy. Up in here in the crotches, stuff where you just know you are not going to want anything. There's a lot of growth here. I'm going to let this extend out because at the moment, you know, it's quite an attractive sort of pad form, but I will continue though to just go back here, junctions here, and just rub this out with my fingers. And I'm basically just, it's obvious because what I've got is stuff that's clearly growing on the top, just rubbing that all off. you know, I'm very, very happy with how this has responded. But I did say to you, it doesn't come back this way for all of them. There's always one or two, if you know, out of a collection of 10, one or two of them do sulk, and that is an underlying problem normally with the roots, even if you don't see it at the time. So let's have a look at one where that has happened. I know there's at least 80% of you shaking your head and going, this guy's a fraud, because that looks dead. There's growth on it, but it really is struggling to put anything more than just the beginning buds. And you've seen how they respond when they're healthy. Well, let's get in close and see how they respond when they're not so healthy. And I do know that when we did the root work on this, there was this plus a couple of others where I said, ooh, roots are a bit damp, wet and not very good. This was one. The other one that hasn't responded so well also had a bad root set. But let's have a look and see. So there it is. Now you can see we've got some leaves that have opened up, and there's a little bud there, but that bud's, I already know that bud's been sitting there for 3 weeks and hasn't actually opened up. We've got parts that are starting to die off. This whole branch, see that bud went to open, it hasn't continued to push, the same here, and every part of me is saying it just hasn't got the desire or the will to push anything much through there. So what you're doing is you're looking to see where's my real life going to come from. And it's tough to see. I've got a little bit there and there. There's a few odd stragglers in different places, little heads of buds, but clearly no energy down in the roots to push it up. Same here, we've got some opening at the top, which is promising, but this is what you see from a tree that could go either way now. And I think sometimes you've got to say to yourself, be ready. This is the reality of bonsai, especially with things like your imported Chinese elms. You get them out, a couple of years later, you think, oh, it's flagging, you pull out, you look at the roots are soggy, wet, you cut them back a bit, there's a few hanging in there, and you think, oh, it'll probably be all right. You change the soil, and it looks like that for a year. And don't despair. Same position with these for a number of trees, and yeah, the odd one will die, but quite often, if, put them in a shady part of the garden, if you don't pay too much attention to them, forget them, don't fertilize them, just leave them in a shady part of the garden. If you're worried about the soil, don't let them get too wet. Anything to give this tree just the right conditions so that it doesn't get too hot, over laboured, or have to push anywhere where it doesn't want to. Would I put it in the greenhouse? I don't know. My greenhouse gets really, really hot suddenly, so baking it could cause just as much harm as not. No, I'm more inclined to put it in a shady part. I've got the lee of the garage. In fact, I'll show you exactly what I mean. Yeah, just here we've got the garage extension. Above it, there's all the guttering and everything, so I've got about this much, a foot, just protected from direct rain coming down. Got a nice lip here, and I can put loads of trees like the azaleas that I did the repots on in May, things that I want to just protect from the harsh. The sun basically gets a weeny bit, but practically no sun here. It'll get maybe an hour in the early morning, and that's it. This is the sort of place where I'm going to put trees that I'm worried about. So really, don't worry, protect it. The ones that are doing well, keep watching them. As those shoots start growing, you start seeing them harden a bit more, start removing more around there, and we'll see that in a minute. So probably I'll be seeing you again at the click of a finger a few weeks later. Ow, I can't click with my fingers. Well, who'd have thought? It's now the 25th of July, and we're going through a week or so of pretty decent weather, 24, 25 degrees. It's not going to be sustained. We've only had 1 or 2 days where it's up in the 28, 29. But for the UK, hey, let's not complain. There's sun out there. That's got to be good. So you can see here over my shoulder that it has continued to put on growth. And what are we, 6 weeks since I last looked at it? And all around it, we've got shoots continue to extend out, and I could be really tempted right now to do a little bit of pruning. But will I? Well, actually yes, there will be a few things I can do, and that relates totally to ensuring that we don't get doubles up or triples up from the same point. There's lots of little buds that are coming from crotch growth, from the bases where we've got branches going up. There's stuff also coming from the base doubling up. We want to try and get the tree to just put the energy where we want it. It's So I will go around and remove some growth. And really we can look at quite easily here. We've got from the same point probably 1, 2, 3. I need to decide whether I want the upward one or the lower one, or indeed the one that's going up but slightly in. It is going to be down to a matter of what you want, but for me I think I want the one that's going slightly up. So I will remove that one. There's one that's going inwards, and I'll remove that one. So now we've just got the one branch there. Then we go further back, again 3 or 4 from the same point. I have to look at it and think I've got one going out that way. Do I want this one? Do I want this one, or do I want this one? I certainly don't want the one that's going up and inwards. So that leaves me these 3 to choose from. Again, it's purely subjective, but that is almost going to come directly into this tree here. So I'm going to remove that one. Just really leaves these 2, and I suppose this is when you want to know maybe where your front's going to be. And if I look at the front being in there somewhere, probably the branch I want is that one. So I'll get rid of this one underneath it. So now I've got 1, 2. Work my way around to this side. I've got 1, 2 and another one going straight up. Very hard to say whether I want the straight up, but if I look at the angle that it would come from here, it's almost right angle. That's not what I want from that. So let's just try and get stuff moving this way. So we've got this. Probably, again, I would go for the one that's slightly upwards. And there we go. So we've got 3 branches now from here that I want to continue to grow out. I'm not going to shorten the lengths. I want them to continue to grow out because in relative terms this is quite a thick in comparison to this, and I need to try and get some sort of relative perspective to it so that it looks natural. So I'm going to let those continue to grow right out. And again, there's little bits of crotch growth that I don't want, so we'll remove that. And again, got a smaller one there. Got this, leave that. And then I'm going to work my way around and completely do the same thing to the whole tree till you're probably going to be left with what, 10, 11 shoots on it. I'll feed it up heavily and let it go for the rest of the year. Let's have a look and see what damage I do to it in just a few minutes. And yeah, there we go. So, you know, I'm not worried too much about the lengths on those. As I said, I'm looking at branch thickening, but what I am doing is making sure there's only ever a single dominant shoot coming from the point that I want the growth. And no, you can't see much of a tree yet, but once these get thicker, I'll then cut them right back because it's the thickness I want of the desired branches. But again, you can see in ventilation, sunlight, all the things you need for this to push on and enjoy the summer in the UK. Yeah, I may well end up cutting this one down further. It's offset, not necessarily ideal for this sort of planting, but it's beginning. And bearing in mind where it was at the beginning, really happy. So let's go and have a look at that stick-like one and see how that's doing. Well, there it is. A lot more growth than you saw earlier. It's pretty solid in the pot. Absolutely no idea of a direction where it's going. I've got 2 options. I could leave it, continue to let it bush out, but again, I want to balance the energy to the places that I want it to go. So I'm going to do the same thing and just start thinking about, you know, I've got branches coming from each different point here. Just pick where I might actually want a branch to grow from. So I'm going to do that and show you what it looks like when it's done. And there it is now. Very, very bare and sparse, but I'm now telling the tree that's where I want you to throw all the growth. So brilliant. And obviously from all that I've got loads of little sort of 6-inch branch stalks or shoots, and in the old days I would literally take those, just carefully remove or clip try not to strip, because if you pull down you actually strip it off the bark, and then I would just poke those into some soil like that, put them down about half the length. That's how I've got hundreds of Chinese elm cuttings that look like that. I just put loads and loads of them in there, and some years you get good strike rate, other years you don't. But if you do it every year, you're always going to have a turnover of new developing bonsai material for your Chinese elms, and it isn't costing you a thing. But it ain't all good news in the retreat. I showed you a couple of others that I was worried about. They already had existing root problems. Well, of the ones I showed you that I'm worried about, there's one in particular I'm going to show you now. But be ready. Make sure you haven't got anything in your tummy right at this moment.
He scares me, man. He just scares me.
Unfortunately, this little Chinese elm, which is probably, I don't know, 12, 13 years old now, just never really got through the rigours of the repotting, potentially getting ignored at different parts of the year over the last few years. This has been slowly dying. You'll notice it. Watch out for, particularly with Chinese elms, if you get one that through the whole growing season doesn't actually put any new growth. It either holds on to the foliage that it's got, and it's not that deep, vibrant green. It's more a sort of pasty, greeny yellow. That's your sign that there's something seriously already going wrong in the roots. And invariably, and I've discovered it with some of my bigger ones as well, that's the sign that the tree is really already dying, despite the fact that you may have green. And we'll do the bark test on this one now, just to see what the signs are, and just show you how long it takes before it exhibits full death. So with something like this, I'll always start higher up. I could start right at the base there, but it can still show green. So right up high there, it's actually still green in there. So that is encouraging in the sense that we may well still get buds that show up on it. But the fact that I'm seeing here lower down buds, but they've all crisped off, they haven't continued to do anything. So although there's green up there, I'll go a little bit lower down. There's still green in there, but it's, if I try and describe it, it's not what I call the healthy green. There's a distinct brown look to it, and often that for me has been a sign of this is withdrawing and dying. And generally the bark colour, the actual trunk colour itself has got an off brown look to it. It doesn't look as healthy as I would say the others do. So for me, this I expect to fully die within the next 6 months.
That's so sad.
What could I do now? Well, in the past I'd have taken this out, put it in sphagnum moss, might have put a black bag over it, all various things like that. I've tried those over the last 10-12 years, and often I'll recognise this one. It'll go in a very shady part of the garden and wait and see what it decides to do. It was repotted beginning of the year, so I know that the issue was with existing root problem and root rot over the last 4 or 5 years. Personally, I think it's going to be on the bonsai bonfire of shame somewhere around fireworks night. Got another little story to show you. This was literally just a thick branch cutting. I plonked it in and said, you know what, Chinese elm are so good at striking roots that often from sort of great big thick, thumb thick, you look at the thickness of that, you can get striking from it. But not always. It showed green for about 6 weeks, which is the residual energy it had in there. But we can pull it out, and absolutely not even a sign of root growth from there. So yeah, that didn't work. Have I got any good news to finish this little excerpt from? Well, yeah, I have. Yep, this little cork bark now is throwing on loads and loads of growth, and all I need to do at this stage is a bit of pruning to profile, which is what I'm going to do right now. And very, very happy and encouraged with how this has responded to what was done. Well, I suppose when you've got as many trees as I have, overall I expect to lose a few. Some of them are the remnants of really poor stock that I got back in 2016, 2017, and have never really recovered from those days. So it happens, and I think, as I keep saying with bonsai, we all have to be ready for that sort of news. So I suppose the next time you're going to see me is, I don't know, October, November, when we're well and truly heading into autumn, Just see how they're going to finish the year looking, because right through winter, absolutely nothing. They'll just go down the bottom part of the garden and be ignored, so to speak. So you've shared my journey of the development of this one over the course of a year or so, where it originated and how it's looking now. All of these shoots, look at them, great big growths out here, massive long. These, if I cut them this long, so they're 9-inch cuttings, I could plant those straight into soil. That's exactly what I am going to do, and that's how you're going to produce those long good whips, just as good, and they will go straight into soil. So what exactly will I do with that now? So really, same thing as I did 3 or 4 months earlier. I'm just going to make sure that I'm going to remove any branches that are conflicting or I don't want, and probably trim these back. But loads of good growth. Now this one down here, quite a very long leggy whip. Not entirely sure what I'll do, but it may well be that I'm just going to apply a bit of wire and just put a little bit of insinuated movement in it, and but let the whip continue to grow, because I want this to keep thickening. So I will put wire onto that. This one is higher up, but I'm looking, that doesn't need to be any thicker. It's coming off those branches. So we'll cut that right back. Now the wire that I've put it on quite loosely, almost like a cage, just to give that general insinuation of movement. As I said, the tips continue to grow up. The whole idea is I want it to still grow and thicken. I want that branch to probably be about twice the thickness it currently is. Always looking at what the trunk's looking like. Your first primary branches, low down, are going to have to be particularly thick. The thing I'll warn you about is that will thicken very, very quickly, especially through the autumn. There'll be a lot of growth, and don't be surprised if I have to take that wire off before we're unwrapping presents. And I imagine sometime next year I'll probably cut it right back if it's thick enough, because I only really want the bottom stump on it, the bottom 2 centimeters. These, do you know what? If you've got no money for soil, but you've still got your original pot, then all I do, and I used to do this all the time, cut the top. I can't afford potting gel, so I'll just put it nice and deep in there, and I'll do that with all the others, and I'll probably poke them all in there as well. Only thing I say to you, when you're poking them down, do be aware. Good idea to make a hole first with the chopstick, otherwise you end up doing what I just did with that one, which is actually crumpling and breaking it in lots of places. They don't do very well if you do that. Okay, well, here we are. It's now the 5th or 6th of December. Some of the Chinese elms I've actually started putting into the cold frame. Me, I'm a little bit careful. I've had some issues with them in the past. I've got the space, so that's where they'll go. And certainly not all of them have got the vibrant green leaves that these have. The ones that, as I say, did a lot of root work earlier in the year, they will definitely go in the cold frame. I'm just going to take a bit more care of them. Do you have to? Well, UK, Zone 9B, shouldn't need to. But remember, they're in pots. They're in a controlled environment. They may struggle more with colder snaps. So, how do we get on with this? Well, the cutting is still very much green-leafed. We've got nice growth still on the trees, no sign of dieback, and indeed, where I put the wire on, we've still got growth going through to the tips. Do I expect more growth? Certainly if they're going to stay outside, no. If they are indoors, although they are a deciduous tree, you may continue to get growth through what you would call the non-growing season, but don't expect it. As I say, all I'll do now, I will put this in the cold frame. Did I get successful growth from an uprooted Chinese elm that just basically didn't have any roots? Well, clearly we got the growth. That means we've got activity down there. And for those of you who've got experience with Chinese elm, you'll know that there was probably never ever going to be an issue with this rooting from what I had at the beginning. But good to see, because next spring, if you're thinking of digging anything up, Chinese elm or elm related, and it's got no roots, definitely go for it. And for those of you wanting to know how those cuttings were getting on that I just took, well, here they are. These have just been thrown into the cheapest potting mix that I had lying about in a bag. All of them are green, all of them are healthy. In fact, every single one of them has taken, and I would expect that next year I'll be able to sort through those and individually pop them up as I like. For those who are interested, I've also got an azalea one there, and I've got some trident maples. Looks like a bird tried to pull that one up. Won't know till next year whether or not they've been successful, but normally, look, there's a Genko in there as well. Normally, about 50% strike rate for all the other stuff. So we'll see that next spring in 2025, which I'm sure you're going to be eagerly putting down in your diary to make sure that you're watching my bonsai retreat in 2025.
Probably not.
So Chinese elm is definitely the beginner's bonsai. It's easy and you get loads of fun and loads of decent results from it. Bonsai has its upsides, but it also has its downsides. And guess what? It isn't always your fault. Often, that's just the way the cookie crumbles. But of course, if you want to see how exactly I did do all my early spring pruning on the Chinese elms in preparation for 2025, well, I've got the perfect video for you. It's that one. Make sure you watch it. Apart from that, happy bonsai and God bless. Cheers.